That's right. Dr. Seuss has been called out as a racist. A month ago, Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis were the designated villains. Their statues were toppled, their existences purged from popular memory. But the revolution has gathered steam since then. Now, a librarian in Massachusetts has rejected First Lady Melania Trump's gift of Dr. Seuss's books, claiming the illustrations are, quote, racist caricatures. Well, the Cat in the Hat is a wonderful cat, but leftists could not be contented with that. In modern America, everything's racist, they'll say as they search for invisible traces. A wonderful cat in a hat can't be funny. He has to be mocking black people for money. And even if Dr. Seuss had no intention to do any wrong, they'll destroy his invention. You'd think that there's no way that this could be true, but for today's leftists, the limits are few. With each day's new outrage, they simmer and stew and suck in their faces until they turn blue. LaDawn Jones is a former Democratic state representative from the state of Georgia, and she joins us now. LaDawn, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me back, Tucker.
So I'll admit, as a middle-aged man who majored in history, not postmodern feminist poetry, this was confusing to me, and I mocked it at first. Dr. Seuss racist? He was a liberal. But then I read, as they say in graduate school, the text. And so I think I understand what's going on here. I want to read you a portion of The Cat in the Hat, and you confirm for me that this is in fact bigotry. I know some good games we could play, said the cat. I know some new tricks, said the Cat in the Hat. A lot of good tricks. I'll show them to you. Your mother will not mind at all if I do. The cat is being portrayed as shady and manipulative here. And that clearly is bigotry. I think you'd agree.
I don't know if I can agree with that. So, you know, we're going to whether or not Dr. Seuss had a history of racism in his past, and it is true. Now, will we call every Cat in the Hat, every Dr. Seuss book a picture of bigotry and racism? I think that may go a little bit too far.
Oh, I don't know. Then maybe, but hold on. Wait, no, but you're reading. Okay, so I guess I have an advantage here because I have, as we say in the academy, the text right in front of me. I want to confront you with the text once more. Then Sally and I did not know what to say. Our mother was out of the house for the day. Now, if that's not a damaging stereotype of single parenthood, I don't know what is. And the idea that this kind of garbage winds up in the hands of preschoolers, I guess shouldn't surprise me given the racist nature of our country. Are you surprised?
You know, that's cute, Tucker, but the reality is, you know, that the librarian that called Dr. Seuss's works partly bigotry and racism spent the majority of her letter to the First Lady of the United States on something far more substantive. But of course, conservatives who want to accuse people who bring up racial issues as race baiting will only focus on that part of her letter.
No, but actually,
what is a serious situation?
But hold on. I don't think all bringing up racial issues is race baiting at all. I'm doing it now, and I'm not race baiting, and I think there are lots of legitimate conversations to have. I'm responding to something very specific she said, which was that Dr. Seuss is a racist. She said that. Now, this was troubling to me as someone who was weaned on Dr. Seuss, who raised 4 children on Dr. Seuss. And then I realized, and I think we have the pictures here, that it's not just my family, but famous political figures have endorsed Dr. Seuss, including the Obamas. And I think we may have actual documentary evidence of the Obamas reading Dr. Seuss. Oh, here it is. Watch.
Pretty much all of the stuff you need to know is in Dr. Seuss.
Now, we're in a revolutionary moment where we're reassessing what we thought we knew. And I'm sure that you're an Obama supporter. In light of what he just said, can you continue to support him?
Oh, absolutely, because here's the reality for many African Americans and people of color in the United States. There are parts of American history, there are famous people in American history who we have to take them for their great parts and dismiss them for the parts of them that were brought up in some of the racist and biggest ways that America had in its history. And so Dr. Seuss, I actually had to, once I heard the story, pull out our Dr. Seuss books that are on my children's bookshelf and take a closer look at them so I can see exactly what it was that was the complaint. And as is normal for many of us.
What was it? I mean, actually, I've been obviously speaking tongue-in-cheek because this is like literally demented. But since you said that you checked Dr. Seuss for racism, what did you find? Where were the racist parts?
So you look at many of the drawings, and you have to put it in the context of the times that many of these books were written. And you can see that there are some very stereotypical drawings of Asian Americans. Dr. Seuss was known for some very stereotypical blackface drawings prior to the books that most of us are familiar with and know and have on our bookshelf.
What
like
books are you talking about? I mean, I grew up not far from Dr. Seuss in California. Theodore Geisel, he was kind of a local hero, big liberal, as I'm sure you know, and he wrote a bunch of books against racism, including The Sneetches, great book. I'm not aware of what you're talking about. I don't think he did many books where he illustrated people. What books specifically on your bookshelf were racist?
Absolutely. No, not specific books. He was actually a cartoonist for political ads. And so if you, a simple Google search, and the first few images that will pop up of Dr. Seuss, you will see where he drew very stereotypical black-faced pictures of individuals and of people portraying stereotypical views of Asian Americans and African Americans. It's common.
So maybe you're leaving out a little
admitted to it.
Do you think you're leaving out some context? The Asian Americans you're talking about were the Imperial Japanese government during the Second World War, the ones who took over Asia and raped and tortured hundreds of thousands of people to death. So you think it's racist that he portrayed that government in an unflattering light? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would imagine that if I were to draw some of the Confederate soldiers in the same kind of light that he did, despite the fact that they were treasonous, people will still find many of those caricatures, if I took their worst features and put it out there and made fun of them, they would call that racist too. So yes, actually
well, I don't know
I
who
do.
they
It doesn't matter if they were bad people.
It's okay to, I think it was okay in 1943 to mock the Japanese army, and so maybe it's lacking a little historical context. It's not okay. It's not okay. Who puts you in charge of what's okay? Like, wait, let me just ask: is there any recognition? I know we're like debating on TV and everything, but does part of you think like, wow, the people I'm around, maybe myself, we're scolds. We've like turned into something we used to hate when we were kids, which is people who jump up and say, "You can't do that." I mean, do you ever think that? Like, what have I become? That I'm denouncing Dr. Seuss?
Well, no. I'm going to tell you what is the first thing that normally comes to my mind is respecting the person who is near me, respecting the people who are around me. I may have private opinions, but there's certain things that you don't say out loud. There's certain things that you stop yourself from thinking out of simple human respect for common man. For example, a perfect one is when your president calls an entire league SOBs. Those are things that you just don't say out of your mouth, particularly when you are a person of power. And so although you may accept it in your community to just say, oh, we talk about people of other races as if it's not a problem, I think a good human American, to make America great again, knows that we respect our neighbors.
I love the parenthetical charge of racism. In your community, you might do that. No, actually, he's denouncing professional athletes of a bunch of different colors. So slow down, LaDon. But you're dodging my key question, which is, why in the world is the left discrediting itself by going after, of all people, Dr. Seuss? Like, it's absurd. Do you recognize that at all? I think there's racism that exists. I mean, of course there is. But Dr. Seuss was not a major purveyor of it. So, like, why are you hassling Dr. Seuss? That's kind of the question. Do you feel silly when you do that?
Absolutely not. And let me tell you what's absurd. This librarian who brought up this whole Dr. Seuss issue had a whole 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs before she talked about Dr. Seuss that talked about how ridiculous it was that they used taxpayer dollars to send books to overprivileged schools that didn't need them. But instead of focusing on that very important point that you should agree with since you're a fiscal conservative, you want to focus on the latter part of her letter that talks about Dr. Seuss. You know why? Because you want to trivialize what really could be an important issue.
I mean, she sounds like the silliest person maybe who's ever lived in this country. Okay.
Isn't it ridiculous that the First Lady of the United States wouldn't know that a school already had all of the most common
I can't believe she sent Dr. Seuss books to a library. She should be in jail. I mean, listen to yourself, LaDon. You're a nice person. I don't mean to be mean, but come on now. Thanks for joining us tonight.
It's not mean. It's just not realistic. And unfortunately, we need people like you to speak up and say that, you know what?
Stop sending Dr. Seuss books. It's bigoted. Yeah, okay.
Hello, my name is Jane. I'm social justice based. Agree with me or you'll be shamed. Hello, my name is Jane. I'm social justice based.